Hey, what's going on? It's your boy BT, and I came here to talk some boxing with the thousands of True School Sports subscribers. What's going on, guys? Now, this is what Kell Brook and why Kell Brook can beat Errol Spence Jr. And obviously, this video for me is gonna be a little easier to do because this is actually what I think will happen. I think Kell Brook is going to beat Errol Spence Jr. and I've been saying this since like the fight was signed. Um, so we'll start off with something very simple: the jab. Kell Brook, from what I've seen, based on both fighters, I've seen a lot of Errol Spence fights. I've seen a lot of Kell Brook fights. I've studied Errol Spence's skill set to a T. I've studied Kell Brook's skill set pretty well. And what I gotta say is, as far as who has a better jab this fight, it's definitely Kell Brook. I think Kell Brook has arguably the best jab in the welterweight division. I think he does the best jab in the welterweight division, but there's definitely a case to be made for maybe a guy like Keith Thurman. Um, yeah, like Keith Thurman's in there as well. So I think Kell Brook has the best jab in the division, and that jab, sets up what is, in my opinion, the most accurate right hand in boxing. I'm not saying it's the hardest or nothing like that. I'm saying it's very accurate. Anytime Kell Brook throws that right hand, more often than not, it's landing. And when you couple a really world class jab with an accurate right hand to go behind it, that's a dangerous fighter. That is a dangerous, dangerous fighter. So I think for Kell Brook, this fight begins and ends with his jab. If he's out jabbing Errol Spence, I don't see any way he's losing this fight unless he gets caught with something stupid. Because as far as his jab goes, I know we'll use a couple fights. So we'll say the Golovkin fight, right? And the Golovkin fight, like Golovkin is a middleweight. Golovkin is known to have one of the best jabs in boxing, and for the majority of the fight, Golovkin did control those rounds with his jab. But Kell Brook had some moments with his jab too in that fight. And you look at the Sean Porter fight, like Porter is not an easy guy to look good against. Keith Thurman didn't look good against him. Andre Berto got his ass whooped by him. Malinage got his ass whooped by him. Devin Alexander, lost to him. And Kell Brook, probably more so than any fighter that's been in the ring with him. And keep in mind, Sean Porter has been in the ring with Keith Thurman, who is a unified champion. He did a much better job controlling and neutralizing Sean Porter with his jab than anybody Sean Porter's fought. And I think that goes a long way. You can say all you want about, Sean being a 140 pounder that came up to 147. The fact of the matter is he's become a solid fighter at 147. He's a good name at 147, and it's hard. He's a hard guy to look good against. Nobody's looked as good against Sean Porter as Kell Brook did on that night, and a big part of that was that jab. So I think the jab for him is definitely the key in this fight against Errol Spence because it sets up everything else. So that's number one. Where he also has a clear advantage to me based on what I've seen is his foot speed. His foot speed is definitely superior to Errol Spence. And foot speed is always important in boxing because foot speed is what allows you to set up your money punches, whether that be a straight right hand, uppercut. It sets traps for guys to walk into them and for you to get your best work off. So foot speed is always important in boxing. That's why if you look at the best fighters throughout the history of boxing, Ali, Sugar Ray Leonard, Sugar Ray Robinson, Pacquiao, Mayweather, just look at any top elite level fighter. They have some, level of foot speed, or if not foot speed, they have intelligent feet. Meaning, they know where to move in the ring to win the battle of positioning to get whatever punch it is they want off. So whether it's a jab, whether to get that lead foot inside of, if you want to get a jab off, the key is to get that lead foot inside of in between the two legs of your opponent, not like in close range. It has to be in close range, but in your punching range. So Kell Brook has the advantage in foot speed, and I think that's what will allow him to set up his jab. It's all connected. The foot speed allows him to set up the jab, which also allows him to set up the right hand. So there's that. But another clear advantage I see in this fight is the fact that he's fighting at home, and that means a lot in boxing. But off rip, even if the fight is close, if the fight is 6-6, he's more than likely going to win the fight just because it's in the UK. That's not me. I'm not. That's a fact. A lot of guys get hometown cooking. Look at the Andre Ward fight. Look at the Adrian Broner fight. Look at what happened with Martin Murray and Rosado recently. It happens, man. So he's got that going for him too. Another thing that I think if you look Kell Brook that you have going for you is the fact that Errol Spence really just doesn't have experience fighting world class fighters. He has experience sparring world class fighters, but as we know, if you've been in the boxing ring, which I know many of my viewers have, and I have done my fair share as well. You know, sparring and actually fighting are much different things. Sparring is where a lot of the times you're working on stuff. You're working on a new combination, and you're working on maybe feinting and throwing a combination, or you're working on maybe a new stance or a new way you stand. There's always things you work on in sparring, but it's never always like a fight because you're working on things. So yes, you're susceptible to get caught with things, but it's not really like an actual fight where you're already fine tuned and you're in shape and all that stuff. Sparring is also used to cut weight too. So there's that. So I think the fact that Errol Spence has no experience really fighting top world class fighters under the bright lights, um, you gotta feel confident about that as Kell Brook. Now you don't want to feel overconfident. You gotta have a healthy respect for your opponent. Trainers like Teddy Atlas and Custom Model and the great trainers of the past have always talked about having a healthy respect for your opponents, not respecting them too much, but having the respect for them to where you can lose them, and that drives you to continue working harder in the gym and staying focused in the fight. So I think the experience is really what Kell Brook has going for him here. Also the fact that a lot of times Errol Spence has enjoyed the advantages of fighting a lot of smaller guys, as has Kell Brook. We're not gonna be biased here. Kell Brook has fought small guys. Errol Spence has fought small guys. Kell Brook's fought bums. Errol Spence has fought bums. But this is fight that's what makes this fight great is that if these guys fought any one of the other top 10 welterweights, they would have a clear advantage in size and probably strength. And that's just being honest because they're big for the weight. But that's what makes the fight great to me because the way I look at it is it's two of the big welterweights, like the actual physically big and strong welterweights, getting in the ring with each other, and they're even in that department to me. So that's where I think Errol Spence is going to have a problem because, like I said, he really hasn't had any opponent, forget world-class fighters, he hasn't had any opponent that's been in the ring with him that's offered him any resistance. I think the closest thing you could find to resistance, or trouble for Errol Spence would have to be in the Emmanuel Arte fight. I believe he got hurt in that fight, or the Alejandro Barrera fight where he got countered multiple times in that fight with uppercuts. So there's that. Outside of that, Kell Brook, his money punches, and if you guys really watch his fights and you don't just go on box, if you're really a student of the boxing and you're not just a box rec research person, you know that Kell Brook, his money punches are the uppercut, his jab, and his left hook, and if you look at fights that I would use and that would alarm me because these things still do happen to Errol Spence, and they haven't happened recently because I think defensively he's gotten a little bit more responsible. It doesn't take as much risk, and his chin isn't as up in the air as it used to be. But Errol Spence Jr., the fight that worries me for him is the Alejandro Barrera fight. I know that was 2 years ago, and he's a much different fighter, and he's matured a little bit, but he still hasn't really fought many people. So when you're not fighting and getting proper experience and guys are offering you little to no resistance in the ring, it's really hard to learn anything because you haven't had to really dig deep into your skill set. So Errol Spence still has a lot of the same problems. He doesn't move his head. There's little to no upper body movement. If you feint him, what happens a lot too, and I think this is another key. This is another thing for Kell Brook. If you feint Errol Spence, if you just feint him, if you give him a feint and then give him a jab, those jabs more likely land if you place them in the right area because a lot of times, or like I said, Errol's not moving his head. So rather than being in your high guard and then maybe slipping your head and just slipping the punches and then countering off of the punches, he's not doing that. His head's in the same place, but he's using his hands to parry the shots. And usually he can get away with that because he's fighting smaller guys and they have the reach to really snap that jab out there and hurt him. But Errol Spence Jr., when I noticed in fights like if you watch the Barrera fight or just any of his fights, go watch how he reacts when the other fighter feints him. He gets very, very, not very tight, but he has a tendency sometimes to get tight and maybe clench his gloves a little bit. And his upper body becomes a little stiff as the fight goes on. So that could be a big problem for him. He's never really gone 12 rounds. I don't think he's gone 12 rounds in quite some time. If he has, it hasn't been a while because he's been stopping everybody. Um, and when you tense up in the ring, or you kind of like if you go and you clench your gloves like this in a fist, and you kind of don't move your head, you're not really doing that. You're wasting a lot of unnecessary energy, and that adds up, especially, and it really shows in a championship fight. So I think for Kell Brook, you use feints not just to set up the jab, but you use feints to exploit a tendency that I've seen in Errol Spence, which is that his upper body becomes very tight when a fighter feints him and then jabs. I've seen it a number of his fights, and it's there to be exploited. So if I'm Kell Brook, feinting is the key. I mean, there's a lot of things that I think he's going to exploit in this fight, and he's going to beat him. I don't know how, but it'll be the unanimous decision or a knockout, because I don't know how Errol Spence's chin will hold up to his power. But I think that Kell Brook is going to beat Errol Spence. And last but not least, we'll go with the right hand, man. We know that right hand is one of the best right hands in boxing, and Errol Spence is susceptible to a right hand. Any southpaw, and I just being my time, when I was boxing regularly, I boxed for about maybe almost 2 years. I was a southpaw, so whenever I got in the ring, I remember I used to always remember when I got in the ring, when I fought another orthodox fighter, they used to always look for the right hand, and that's usually how it is in boxing. Period. When an orthodox fighter is fighting a southpaw fighter, it's a lot easier for them to get the right hand off, because if I'm like this, right? If I'm like this, right? My lead hand is my right hand, and then let's say your lead hand, your left hand. It's easier for me to come over the top of my right hand. So Kell Brook has referred to himself as the Southpaw Slayer because he does that in the gym. I guess he beats up on southpaws and then he spars them all the time. And if you go watch, Alejandro Barrera had a lot of success with his with a lot of those counters he's landing. So Errol, to me, even if he hasn't necessarily shown it in the last couple fights, his upper body movement has stayed the same. So the weaknesses are still there. The tendencies are all still there to be exploited. Kell Brook, being that he has the superior foot speed, can lure Errol Spence, because that's another thing. Errol Spence attacks in straight lines. If he had used angles a little more, it'd be different. But he attacks in straight lines, and because he does that right hand, he'll be open for the right hand all night. And I see Kell Brook winning a unanimous decision, or just getting a victory. I think his style is all wrong for Errol Spence, and styles make fights. I think Kell Brook beats Errol Spence, but I think Errol Spence beats Keith Thurman, and I think Keith Thurman will give Kell Brook a hard time. So triangle theories don't work in boxing. Just because you beat one fighter doesn't mean you beat another fighter. But I think I got Kell Brook winning this fight, and I've given you guys my reasoning and why Errol Spence can beat Kell Brook, and why Kell Brook can beat Errol Spence, and what they got to do and all that stuff. So I've been rambling. Hope you guys enjoyed the videos, but let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Take the time to subscribe, and you can love me or you can hate me, but I'm just a kid from Daniel. So until next time, take care, guys.